Hello and welcome to React Series Part 4, where I'll be going over React Component Lifecycles. So, React Component Lifecycles and the relevant methods are related to class components, and in class components we actually can utilize different methods in each phase. So, the following lesson will be based on class components, not function components. So main lifecycle phases for class components are mounting, updating, and unmounting. The mounting phase is where an instance of a component is being created and inserted into a DOM. And there's certain sets of methods that are called in order. And we're going to look at three main methods, which is constructor, render, and component did mount. Render is the only method that is required, but the constructor and the component did mount are optional. But we're gonna look at each use cases. And the next phase is updating phase, and the updating phase is triggered when the props or the state of the component is changed. And one of the main methods that we're going to look at in this phase is component did update. And the last phase is unmounting phase. This is where the component is being removed from the DOM, and that's where you can do actual cleanup for your component. And that's the last phase that the component goes through. And we're going to look at component will unmount method and what are the use cases for it. So for the example project, we're going to use an API to request a country, and we're going to parse the data and get the capital of it. So it's going to be like a very little search web app that we can input any country's name and look up its capital. And we're going to use create React app boilerplate and Axios to send requests. And the details for this documentation, the details for this tutorial you can look up in the documentation, and I'll also leave it in the links. So let's go ahead and see the demo. So this is how our application will look like. As you can see, it's very simple. We have an input box and two buttons. When the component is mounted, there will be, we can specify a default country. So right now it's Ireland, but we can change it to, let's say, Japan. And as you can see, we're just getting a callback from the API and parsing the capital of that country. And we can unmount it, and we'll have an alert saying component will unmount. It's being deleted or being removed from the DOM, and we can mount it again. And as you can see, the default country is Ireland. And we're going to use this REST API to get our information about countries, and we're going to look up by name. As you can see here, we're just going to pass the string to our Axios and get the results. All right. Just to show how what we receive from the API, let's go ahead and make a request on Postman. I'm going to go ahead and pass the URL and say, let's say Russia. And if we send a GET request, as you can see, we're going to receive a ton of information about that country. Capital, this is what we're interested in, but you can play around with it and make a list of information about that country, like the region, population, area, borders, and so forth. All right, and let's go ahead and start coding. So let me actually get the app real quick. Let's let's close that and bring our application. So this is our demo, and I'm just gonna run it so you can see that it's just a basic boilerplate for create React app. As you can see, it's just this same boilerplate with the h1 tag saying hello. And if we go back to our code and look at our package.json, I have already installed Axios, and you can do it by typing npm install Axios, and that's all we need for this tutorial. I'll make sure to upload the code to GitHub and leave the link below. All right, so let's go ahead and create a folder called components. All right, and we're gonna name our component board.js. All right, and our component will be a class component. First, we have to import React from React, and we're gonna say export default. We're just gonna go ahead and export our component beforehand. Class board extends React.component. Okay. All right. Now we're gonna need our render method, because the render is required for mounting, and we're gonna return, let's say, just saying for like h1 hello from board. All right, so just to test our board component, let's go ahead and import it in the app.js. So import board from /components/board, and let's render it under hello. All right, it's compiled successfully, and as you can see, we are getting our component hello from board. Okay, so the first phase, as I talked about, is mounting phase. So one of the methods that we're going to implement is the constructor, so we can keep track of the state of our component. Let's go ahead and do constructor, and we're going to pass props, and we're going to call super. Okay, and let's declare our state. This dot state equals the object, and we're just going to have two variables in our state. The first one is going to be a value, which is going to be country's name. So in this case, our default is Ireland, and we're going to have data, which is going to be a null. So when we get our information from the API, we're going to set the data into whatever information we get. All right, so this is our constructor. So the last method in the mounting phase is component did mount, and for component did mount, we're actually going to call our initial country's capital and parse it. All right, so let's go ahead and modify our render. So we're going to have a div with an h1 tag saying enter country name, and we're gonna have an input box, and it's gonna be a type of text. We're just gonna name it country. Value, so the initial value that we're gonna show is this that state that value, which is Ireland. And on change, so when the input actually changes, we have to keep track of it and push it to our state. So on change, we're gonna actually create a new function called handle change. All right, so right now we don't have that function, so let's go ahead and declare it. So handle change will basically set the state of value to whatever input that we make. So, and we're going to use arrow functions to avoid this binding, which is much easier to use. So in that case, we're going to capture the event, whatever the input was given, and we're going to set the state value to the input that's being passed. Target dot value. All right, so we've declared our handle change, and the next element that we're gonna need is the button. Okay, and on click, we're gonna call another function that will actually make the API request to our URL. And we're gonna call this function get country info. So right now it's not declared, but we will declare it soon. And we're gonna say it's name of the button submit. And let's go ahead and declare our function. We're gonna use arrow function again. So get country info. An arrow function, and this is where we actually use an Axios to to get the information from our API. So let's go ahead and import Axios from Axios. All right, so we have imported it, and now we're going to make our API call. So Axios. So we're going to use method get, and the URL. Let me just get the real URL real quick. So this is the URL that we're using, and after name slash, we're gonna pass our input value. And I'm using backticks so we can insert the variable to our string. So we're gonna say this that state that value. All right, and we're gonna say that then. So when we get the response, we're gonna use our this that set state method and assign that response object to our data. Okay, and we'll have a catch to get any error, and we're just gonna console log it. All right, so we have our get country info ready to go. Okay, and let's save that. Compiled successfully. All right, good. So where does the component did mount come in? So this is the last method in mounting phase. So component did mount. Component did mount is usually used for API calls. If you're trying to get information and display it to the user after your component is mounted, you usually use component did mount. So this is where we're gonna call our initial country and get its capital inside the component did mount, and this method is executed after render function. So after your component is mounted, basically displayed, this method is called, and when this method is called, we're going to pre-populate our information section, and that's how we're going to have a first default country being displayed. All right, and this is where we're going to call get country info function. So let's go ahead and actually add another h1 tag to display the capital. So we're gonna say h1 tag. We're gonna name it capital, and in this one we're gonna use a conditional to catch an error. Basically, if we don't receive any data, we're going to display no data within the h1 tag. But if we do receive a data, we're going to display that country's capital. So the way that we're going to do is by saying this dot state dot data. If it is null, I'm gonna display no data. But if it's not null, we're gonna actually parse the data and get the capital. This dot state dot data. That's our data object that is here. And now we're parsing it. Actually, now we're going through the data that was received. Since we received an array, we're going to say data. And we're going to get the first element within that array. And we're going to get capital variable. Okay, let's save that and let's go ahead and see our first board. As you can see, the first country is Ireland, Dublin. And if we change it to a different country, let's say Japan, now we're getting Tokyo. And if we say Russia, we got Moscow. So those are the three main methods that that are used in mounting phase. So it's a constructor, it's the render, and lastly it's a component did mount. All right, in the next section we're gonna look at update. So the update phase has a component did update method. And it is executed if there is a change to our state or props. So the way I'm going to demonstrate it by using a console log. And one of the recommendations is that you have to have some sort of conditional within your did update method, or otherwise it might just get out of control and keep causing a re-render to your component. So in this case, we're just gonna execute a console log if the value that we enter has been changed. So the way we're gonna do it is by saying this that state that value, and we can actually pass two variables into our component did update. Those are previous props and previous state. So we can actually access previous props and previous state. And you can name it whatever you want for the parameters of the method. So we're going to say if current state is different than previous state, so previous state dot values, we're just going to print console log name has been changed. All right, let's save that and see it in action. All right, if we go ahead and open up our application, as you can see, the component has been mounted, but hasn't been any change to either props or state. So in our case, it's a state. So input box is the only state that the user can control. So if we start typing something, as you can see, the component did update is being executed and saying that the name has been changed. So that's how we're accessing component did update method. So if we say Russia, name has been changed. And if we say United States of America, Washington, D.C. So it's capturing any change, any character change, and saying that the state has been changed. Okay, and lastly, we're going to look at unmounting method. And for that, we're going to go to our app.js. And let's go ahead and remove hello. And we will just have a very simple button that will unmount and mount our board. So we can declare the state either using a constructor or by just saying state. Okay, those are the one of two ways. And for our state, we'll just have a toggle variable saying it's true. So if toggle is true, we'll display our board. If toggle is false, we're going to remove it. Okay. So now we have the state. Let's go back to our board and actually implement component will unmount. Component will unmount. And this method is called right before your component is about to be removed from the DOM or deleted. This is where you can do various things, but mostly people use it to, let's say, cancel any network request or just clear your data for that component, so nothing is being messed up. So this is used for pretty much a cleaning phase for your component. But for now, we're just gonna call an alert saying that the component will unmount. And This will be called right before it's about to be unmounted. Okay. So we can't actually unmount the component within itself. So we're going to go ahead to app.js, which is mounting this component. And that's where we're going to actually perform unmounting. Okay, for this one, let's go ahead and set the state. So we're going to have curly brackets. And we're going to say this dot state dot toggle. If it's true, we're going to render our board. If it's false, we're just going to have h1 tag saying deleted. All right. And we're going to have another button to change our toggle from true to false to perform the actual mounting and unmounting. And we're going to have an onClick event, and it's going to call a method called delete component. We will create delete component soon. But let's go ahead and set the text, and the text will be conditional based on the toggle. So this dot state dot toggle, we're gonna say, so if it's true, it's gonna say unmount, and if it's false, we're going to say mount. Okay. And let's go ahead and create our handle toggle method. Delete component that will handle toggles. So we're going to use an arrow function. And all we're going to do is set the state. And we're just going to say whatever the toggle is, set it to opposite. So it's like a switch, like a light switch. Toggle. Okay. Let's save that. I think this should be good. Now, if we go back to our app, as you can see, since the default state is mounted, we're seeing our country's name, the default Ireland, and the capital. And if we're going to press unmount, this method will be called. All right, let's watch that. Unmount, and as you can see, we're getting an alert saying component will unmount. Press OK, and our component is deleted. And if we want to re-render that component again, we're going to press mount, and it goes through that lifecycle one more time, and it's being displayed again. All right, hopefully that helped you to understand the component lifecycles. And if you want to read up more, I would strongly recommend going through the React documentation. You can see a current updates to the lifecycle methods. And yeah, thank you for watching, and happy coding.